1904. Beneath the ruins of Ephesus, a team of archaeologists brushed dust from an ancient stone tomb. Inside lay the bones of a young woman, her skull elongated in the Egyptian style, her ornaments blending Greek elegance with African mystery. Whispers spread. Could this be the lost sister of Cleopatra? History had long forgotten that Cleopatra even had one. A sister once called Queen, later condemned to silence. The inscriptions were faint, the name erased. Yet the air seemed to hum with a buried truth. This discovery would reopen a wound Egypt tried to heal with denial, that behind Cleopatra's shining legend was another woman, born of the same blood, raised in the same palace, and destroyed by the same world. Her name was Arsinoë IV, the sister history buried twice, once in the earth and once in memory. To understand Arsinoë's tragedy, we must return to a kingdom already in decay. Egypt, once a beacon of gods and gold, had become a pawn in the ambitions of Rome. The Ptolemaic dynasty, Greek rulers of Egyptian lands, was rotting from within. Generations of incest, betrayal, and political murder had turned royal blood into a curse. By the time Arsinoë was born, her father, Ptolemy XII, ruled more by bribes than by faith. The people despised him. Rome, ever hungry for control, circled like a vulture. Amid this chaos, two sisters grew under the same roof in Alexandria. Cleopatra, the favored heir trained in the art of seduction and strategy, and Arsinoë, quiet but fiercely intelligent, watching, listening, learning. They lived in an age when power was not shared, it was seized. In the Ptolemaic court, family love was a dangerous illusion. Here, only one truth endured. For one child to rise, another must fall. Arsinoë's childhood unfolded within marble halls overlooking the harbor of Alexandria, a city where the world itself seemed to meet, the Greek, the Egyptian, the Roman. While Cleopatra charmed tutors with her wit and languages, Arsinoë wandered the library, absorbing myths of women who had been both queens and sacrifices. She was not the favorite daughter. Her tutors were fewer, her privileges narrower, yet she learned what others ignored: the silences of court politics, the tremors behind every smile. In her, there was both grace and defiance, the shadow of a girl who understood she lived in another story. When their father died, the kingdom fractured. Cleopatra claimed the throne beside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. Arsinoë, just a teenager, was pushed to the margins, an ornament to power, not its heir. But she saw the cracks in Cleopatra's reign: famine, unrest, whispers of Rome's growing control. Perhaps it began as resentment. Perhaps it was survival. But as Cleopatra embraced Julius Caesar and the people starved outside the palace walls, Arsinoë's silence turned to fury. In another life, she might have been a poet, a scholar, a quiet queen of peace, but history does not grant such mercy to those born in dynasties built on betrayal. Arsinoë's story was never meant to survive. Her name was erased from scrolls, her face from carvings. Yet, beneath the grandeur of Cleopatra's legend, Arsinoë's shadow lingers, gentle, wounded, and waiting. Because before one sister ruled the world, another fought simply to exist. In 48 BCE, Alexandria teetered on the edge of collapse. Cleopatra, barely 21, had secured an alliance with Julius Caesar, the rising Roman general who could protect her throne. But the city was a tinderbox, and her younger sister, Arsinoë, refused to fade into obscurity. When Cleopatra aligned with Caesar, Arsinoë saw betrayal. She fled the palace under the cover of night, slipping into the labyrinthine streets of Alexandria, her heart a mixture of fear and determination. The army, disillusioned with Cleopatra's foreign Roman protector, welcomed her. They proclaimed her Queen of Egypt, a title that was more than symbolic. It was a declaration that Egypt would not bow to Rome without resistance. For Arsinoë, the crown was both armor and weapon. It allowed her to fight for her life, her dignity, and the legitimacy that the world denied her. The Nile itself seemed to tremble beneath the weight of two sisters at war. Their rivalry was not a matter of personal spite alone. It was the struggle of a kingdom caught between loyalty and fear, between native pride and imperial ambition. Every decision, every maneuver became a statement of survival. The streets of Alexandria became a battlefield, a city divided by loyalty and blood. Pharaohs and generals, Roman soldiers and Egyptian levies all wove a web of conflict beneath the golden spires. Arsinoë, cloaked in the authority of her army, moved like a specter through the city, her young face hardened by strategy. Clashes erupted in marketplaces and narrow alleys. Bridges over the Nile were guarded with desperate vigilance. Citizens, terrified of the violence, hid behind shutters and doors as fire and steel clashed. Cleopatra, sheltered within her palace walls and supported by Caesar's legionaries, orchestrated political maneuvers as deadly as the battles themselves. Every street held whispers of betrayal, neighbors turning on neighbors, commanders plotting behind closed doors, and spies reporting movements in the dead of night. In this maelstrom, Arsinoë's courage was both admirable and tragic. She fought not for glory, but to assert her existence in a world that sought to erase her. The city became a chessboard, and the sisters were the queens, each move calculated, each risk fraught with life or death. Rome's shadow loomed over every confrontation, its presence a silent reminder that Egypt's autonomy was fleeting. The blood spilled was not just of soldiers, but of hope, innocence, and the fragile dreams of two sisters caught in the machinery of empire. Yet beneath the clamor of battle, the human cost was immense. Two sisters, born of the same womb, now faced each other across a battlefield lined with the bodies of men who died for causes not entirely their own. For Arsinoë, every order to fight carried the weight of heartbreak. She saw in Cleopatra not just a rival, but a reflection of what she might have been, a sister bound by blood yet torn by ambition. Cleopatra, in her gilded chambers, knew the eyes of Rome watched her every decision. She could not show weakness, could not afford sentiment. Yet in the silence of the night, even she must have felt the sting of betrayal. The Nile bore witness to this familial fracture, carrying away both hope and sorrow as it had done for centuries. By the end of the siege, the sisters had become symbols, one of power aligned with Rome, the other of resistance and erased legitimacy. In the theater of war, victory was always tinged with tragedy, and survival came at a price measured not in gold but in the fractured bonds of family. The story of Arsinoë and Cleopatra was not merely one of conquest. It was the heartbreaking narrative of women forced to choose between love and duty, between existence and annihilation. Chains clinked against marble as Arsinoë IV was led through the streets of Rome, her young body exposed to the jeering masses. The air was thick with incense, dust, and the fervor of victory. Citizens crowded balconies, leaning forward to witness a spectacle that blended awe with cruelty. A princess of Egypt, the last hope of her dynasty, reduced to a living emblem of Rome's conquest. She walked with a measured dignity, but the weight of humiliation pressed upon her chest. Each cheer from the crowd was a knife twisting in her resolve, each Roman glance a reminder that she was no longer mistress of her fate. Caesar's triumph was not merely political, it was psychological warfare. Arsinoë's chains bound her physically, but her spirit, though battered, remained defiant. The city of Rome, magnificent and merciless, had transformed her into a warning. This is what becomes of those who oppose Rome. The spectacle of the triumph was ritualized perfection, yet beneath its grandeur lay profound cruelty. Arsinoë was paraded through Rome as a symbol of conquest, her youth and beauty weaponized against her. Artists captured her likeness in stone and paint, transforming grief into propaganda. Caesar, master of perception, allowed no nuance. Her fear, her tears became part of Rome's narrative. Crowds shouted, danced, and sang praises to their generals, oblivious to the human life they celebrated as a trophy. Soldiers marched in formation, banners fluttering, exotic captives displayed like possessions. Arsinoë, once a princess of Alexandria, walked beside them in silence, her eyes scanning the faces of strangers who knew her only as a defeated queen. Every step was measured to humiliate, every gaze to remind her of power lost. In private moments, she must have mourned not just her kingdom, but the family torn apart by ambition. Cleopatra sat safely in the wings, her throne secured, while Arsinoë became a cautionary tale etched into Rome's collective memory. The ritual turned grief into performance, despair into spectacle. She was not allowed the dignity of mourning, only the visibility of her defeat. The city's roar swallowed her voice, reducing her existence to a tableau of shame. Even as Rome celebrated, Arsinoë's mind remained vigilant. She understood the stakes. Humiliation was a tool, not the end. To survive, she would need to endure this ritual, internalizing the performance while plotting her life beyond the cheering crowds. Rather than execution, Arsinoë was sent into exile, a decision that baffled contemporaries. Rome's logic was opaque. Perhaps her youth spared her, perhaps political calculation restrained them. But exile, cloaked as mercy, became a slow torment. Stripped of court, family, and homeland, she was left with memory as her only companion. In exile, she navigated the tenuous mercy of her captors, the invisible chains of diplomacy, and the gnawing awareness that her sister Cleopatra now ruled unchallenged. Rome's spectators had gone home, but the shadow of her defeat remained, a constant reminder that survival alone could be a punishment more bitter than death. Arsinoë's intellect and resilience became her armor. She wrote letters, sought counsel, and measured every word and movement with care. Each day she balanced fear with cunning, humiliation with quiet dignity. Rome had conquered her body and her name, but it could not fully claim her mind. In the private theater of exile, she remained sovereign over herself. Even as the world outside celebrated her subjugation, survival, she learned, could be both gift and curse, a living testament to what it means to endure when history has already judged you. Ephesus rose like a vision of marble and devotion along the Aegean coast, a city of grandeur and quiet ritual. At its heart stood the Temple of Artemis, one of the ancient world's holiest sanctuaries, revered for centuries as a gateway between the divine and mortal realms. To the outside world, it was a place of safety, of spiritual refuge. To Arsinoë, it became a gilded cage. The temple's walls, etched with symbols of gods and beasts, seemed to whisper both welcome and warning. Statues of Artemis watched silently, their eyes frozen in eternal vigilance. Every corridor, every colonnade was a reminder that she was no longer free to walk among her own people, no longer queen in her homeland. Here, the splendor of devotion was inseparable from the silence of exile. Arsinoë's presence disturbed the sanctity of the temple. Once a princess and a queen in the making, she was now a guest whose very existence challenged the delicate balance of politics, religion, and power. Though protected by sacred law, she was trapped by it, forced into the impossible tension of safety and captivity, holiness and humiliation. The temple became both shield and prison, a place where divinity mocked the fragility of human ambition. Days in the temple passed with a rhythm both rigid and stifling. Morning prayers echoed against the marble halls, while priests moved silently in ceremonial precision. Arsinoë learned to inhabit this world of ritual, keeping her thoughts cloaked in obedience even as her mind roamed freely. She wrote letters to distant allies, observing carefully who might betray her words to Rome or Alexandria. Every communication became a test of discretion, every interaction a tightrope walk between hope and danger. Her reflection deepened over the years. In solitude, she recalled Alexandria's harbor, the cries of battle, the gleam of her sister's eyes. Memories became both comfort and torment. She read ancient texts, studied philosophy, and trained her mind as soldiers train their bodies. Each day was a testament to survival, an assertion that her story had not yet ended. Yet the shadow of Cleopatra's fame loomed ever larger. Stories of Cleopatra's power, beauty, and cunning reached Ephesus, filtered through traders and travelers, turning Arsinoë's exile into a ghostly comparison. She was no longer a ruler, but a footnote in her sister's legend, her own identity gradually dissolving under the weight of another's myth. The walls of marble that should have protected her instead reflected her isolation, reminding her that even survival could be a form of slow erasure. Time in the temple became a mirror of Arsinoë's mind, reflecting both her strength and fragility. Isolation gnawed at her resolve. She spoke to no one beyond the priests and attendants, and even their faces became shadows, indistinct and unreliable. Sleep brought dreams of Alexandria, streets stained with blood, the faces of friends and soldiers she could not save, and Cleopatra's triumphant gaze. Fear crept into her daily existence. Rome's long reach seemed eternal, and even the sanctuary's sacred walls could not shield her from the consequences of dynastic politics. Letters intercepted, rumors carried on the wind, and whispers from the priesthood reminded her that her safety was conditional, fragile, and political. She was living in a paradox a place of divine protection that could not protect her from history's machinery. Her identity fractured as years stretched into a decade of spiritual and psychological confinement. The girl who had fled Alexandria became a woman haunted by absence, forced to exist as a symbol of power denied, of a throne lost. Memory became both solace and torment, blending past triumphs and defeats into an endless loop of regret. Her mind, once sharp and calculating, became a labyrinth of fear, reflection, and longing. In the quiet nights, when the temple was dark and silent, Arsinoë understood the cruelest truth. Exile could be worse than death. She remained alive, but her voice, her agency, and her claim to history had all been stolen. Within sacred walls, she had become a ghost, the living embodiment of a name erased, a story rewritten, a queen imprisoned not by chains, but by time, memory, and the silent hand of her sister's enduring legend. By 41 BCE, Arsinoë had become more than a symbol. She was a threat. Though trapped in Ephesus, her very existence challenged Cleopatra's authority. Rumors reached the Egyptian queen that factions loyal to Arsinoë whispered of rebellion, of leveraging the princess's claim to destabilize Cleopatra's reign. Political pressure from Rome intensified. Mark Antony, Cleopatra's powerful ally, feared that allowing Arsinoë to survive might invite insurrection, tarnishing both Egyptian and Roman authority. Cleopatra, already a figure of myth and manipulation, faced a dilemma. A living sister in a foreign sanctuary was a danger too seductive to ignore. She could not attack openly. To violate sacred law would anger gods and people alike. Yet inaction carried the risk of revolt. The decision was both political and personal, entwined with ambition, fear, and survival. It required the erasure of Arsinoë, the quiet removal of a rival who, though exiled, remained a living reminder of a past that could destabilize the present. The night was heavy with tension. Torches flickered along the marble corridors of the Temple of Artemis, casting elongated shadows that danced like phantoms. Arsinoë, unaware of the approaching danger, prayed quietly, her hands tracing the carved symbols of protection. The silence of centuries pressed against her, sacred and serene. Suddenly, the calm shattered. Assassins, carefully dispatched, slipped through the temple gates. Their steps were measured, precise, yet each footfall resonated like a heartbeat in the stillness. Arsinoë turned, startled, but she had no weapon, no army, only the frailty of a single human against the calculated violence of political necessity. She fell to her knees, not in surrender, but in the acknowledgement of fate. The assassins struck swiftly, methodically. Torchlight glinted off blades as shadows intertwined with the marble, a violent ballet that desecrated the sanctuary. Her final breaths were silent yet monumental, an unrecorded scream that could not be captured by history, a defiance swallowed by obedience to Rome and Cleopatra. Outside, the city of Ephesus slept, unaware that one of history's last Ptolemaic queens had been extinguished. Inside, the temple's sanctity was violated, the divine silence pierced by mortal ambition. A queen, trained to survive palace intrigue, had succumbed not to open war, but to calculated erasure. In her final moments, Arsinoë embodied the cruel paradox of power. Holiness shielded her body, yet human ambition destroyed her soul. The aftermath was a quiet horror. Ephesus mourned in shadows, the priests whispered of sacrilege, and Rome said nothing. Cleopatra's image grew untouchable, her legend untarnished by the murder of her sister. History recorded power, conquest, and victory, but not the life extinguished within sacred walls. Arsinoë's name faded, her claim obliterated by a combination of divine law, political calculation, and familial cruelty. Mark Antony, complicit yet distant, understood the gravity of what had been done. Political expedience had triumphed over morality, and the gods of the temple were left to witness the violation. For Cleopatra, the act solidified her rule, eliminating the last serious rival within her family. Yet the method, the desecration of a holy sanctuary, the deliberate silencing of a sister, was a shadow upon her reign that few could name. Arsinoë became a ghost in history. She survived in whispers, in fragments, in the rare ink stains of surviving scrolls, yet the full truth was denied. Her life, her struggle, her brilliance, all erased in the pursuit of absolute power. Cleopatra ascended, Rome cheered, and the waters of the Aegean carried away the cries of a young queen whose only crime was to exist. In the theater of history, some stories end in triumph, others end in silence, their echoes faint but haunting, waiting for centuries to remember. In the 21st century, archaeologists uncovered a tomb in Ephesus, its stones cracked and weathered by centuries of wind and water. Among the relics lay a skeleton of a young woman adorned with jewelry of Egyptian design, her features unmistakably of the Nile's heritage. Scholars debated whether this could be Arsinoë IV, the sister whose name history had swallowed. Carbon dating and stylistic analysis suggested the right era. The context of the tomb aligned with ancient records of royal exile. Yet certainty eluded them. The tomb's inscriptions were indecipherable, worn away like the memory of the woman herself. Still, her bones whispered a story long suppressed. A queen denied her right to rule, erased from the annals of power, yet quietly present in the earth itself. Arsinoë's fate exposes a harsh truth. History is rarely impartial. Cleopatra's legend endured, celebrated for beauty, cunning, and power, while her sister's existence faded into obscurity. Ancient chroniclers, often male and politically motivated, documented triumph and conquest, not suffering and erasure. Women like Arsinoë, who challenged dynasties or dared to survive, were written out of memory, their stories lost to propaganda, silence, or deliberate obliteration. The patterns repeat across time. Queens, princesses, and women in power have been reduced to footnotes or villains in narratives crafted by those who survived and those who wrote history. Arsinoë's life, a testament to intelligence, courage, and endurance, illustrates the unseen cost of political ambition and familial rivalry. Though she perished in a sacred temple, her story lives in fragments, waiting for careful eyes to reconstruct the truth. The silence imposed upon her was not permanent. It lingers in the ruins, the skeletons, the faint echoes of names almost forgotten. Arsinoë IV's voice may never rise again in celebration, nor her crown restored. Yet her story persists in the shadows of history, a reminder of what power can erase and what memory can reclaim. Cleopatra's legend shines, but it casts a shadow, one where a sister once lived, fought, and died unseen. Modern discovery, reflection, and research allow us to honor her presence. Faint though it may be in remembering Arsinoë, we glimpse the quiet resilience of the erased, the subtle defiance of those whom history tried to silence. Her legacy endures not in triumph, but in the whisper of justice long denied.